In the previous lesson, you learned how the shaft encoders worked and downloaded a sample program that controlled how far the robot traveled using the encoders. In this lesson, we're going to examine the first section of the forwardForDistance program. The pragma statements at the very top configure Robot C to work with the motors and encoders connected to your robot. The Cortex microcontroller has ports dedicated for the motors, so the motor configuration we did in the movement section was optional. The analog and digital ports, however, can be used to connect many different types of sensors, so you need to tell Robot C what sensors you have and which ports they're plugged into before they can be used. Robot C makes it easy to configure these ports using the Motors and Sensor Setup menu, and automatically generates these pragma statements, so no coding is required on your part. In fact, don't type in this section unless you absolutely mean to, because it's only meant to be set using the Motors and Sensor Setup menu. Before we start working with the Motors and Sensor Setup menu, let's save this program with a new name. Save the program as Labyrinth Using Encoders in the folder containing your Robot C programs. Now go to the Robot menu and choose Motors and Sensor Setup. A new window will appear. Click on the tab labeled Digital Sensors 1 through 12. Next to port DGTL1, short for Digital Port 1, the name for the encoder on the right side of the robot is displayed, Right Encoder. You can name sensors anything you want, as long as there are no special characters or spaces, and the name isn't a reserved word already used by Robot C. Giving sensors descriptive names, such as Right Encoder, will help you keep track of them when you write programs. Next to the name is the sensor type, Quadrature Encoder. Each of the digital sensors is available as a choice from this drop-down menu. Finally, by looking at the sensor type for Digital Port 2, you can see that it is where the second encoder wire should be plugged in. On the VEX Cortex, the two Quadrature encoder wires must always be plugged in on neighboring ports. On the next line, Digital Port 3 is configured for the encoder on the left side of the robot, Left Encoder, with its second wire in Digital Port 4. Alright, now that you know how the encoders are configured in the Motors and Sensors Setup menu, you can close out of it for now. In this lesson, you learned how to configure the encoders in Robot C using the Motors and Sensors Setup menu. It's a great start, but there's still several parts of the program left to investigate. Move on to the next lesson to learn how the remaining pieces work.